Now, America Uncancelled. I'm really pleased that we have our next guest on the show, someone who's really been quite courageous in the face of amazing and un-American political intimidation, Caroline Wren. Caroline, you were former fundraiser for President Donald Trump. You knew all of his major donors. You've played a big role in the whole MAGA movement. Can you give our viewers an insight into what it's like to deal with this unconstitutional, congressionally, just like legally AWOL 1-6 commission?
You know, it has really been awful. It's been a kind of traumatizing experience. And you know, I moved to D.C. in 2008, and I've worked in politics my whole adult life. And I did that because I love democracy. I believe in democracy. I believe in our government. I believe in helping make the government better. So to then have Congress target you, like as a private citizen who has dedicated their adult life to making government better, then accuse you essentially of being a domestic terrorist, right? Like that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to label all of us as these horrible monsters. Like that is, it's really, you know, shattering for you. And especially for me, it was just to have that all happen. And it's the opposite of why I moved here and what I work on and what I'm trying to do in Washington, D.C. And it is their attempt to destroy and harm anyone who is affiliated with Donald Trump.
So I know that, you know, when you get subpoenaed or called in one of these committees, you have to be careful, obviously, about your own legal defense, even though you've done nothing wrong. But what do you think what's their beef with you? Like, what do they think you did that was inappropriate?
So I think that they want to tie up and hold up anyone who is affiliated with Donald Trump to make sure they cannot be assisting him in any way should he decide to run for president again. So for me, it was a natural target. I was his fundraiser, and I'm still 100% behind him. I believe in Donald Trump and want to help him in any way that I can. But they, you know, I spent the last year really tied up in this. It takes a tremendous amount of your time. It's a very scary thing to have to deal with. For people might be like, I've never dealt with anything like this. I've never had to hire attorneys or things. And so the point is to like tie up anyone. You're seeing it. I mean, they've subpoenaed now close to like over 50 people, and that's just what we know about. Now they're not even being transparent anymore about who they actually are sending them to. But if you look at who it is, it's anyone who had worked on his, you know, campaign or is continuing to work with him. And again, it's to tie them up. But for myself, I'm a fundraiser. And so, you know, the donor had come to me and wanted to help support a event that was going to take place in Washington, D.C. that afforded for hundreds of thousands of Americans to gather in their nation's capital and to protest their government, which is, you know, the definition of the First Amendment. Everyone has every right to do that. And then the president, you know, decided to speak. But my role was to help make sure that that event was professionally produced and well funded. And again, this was at the White House of Lips. This was 1.5 miles away from the Capitol. But at this point, you know, the majority of people who were in Washington, D.C. that day were there to peacefully exercise their First Amendment right to protest. But the erased distinction between those who committed violence at the Capitol and those who were involved in organizing or attending a First Amendment protected rally in the nation's capital that day has been a hallmark of Speaker Pelosi's efforts to, you know, demonize and humiliate those of us who are in political dissent and to embed the events of January 6th into the American psyche. And that is ultimately what they want to do. And now I think the next place they're taking it is they want to make sure that President Trump can never run for office again. And they are using a branch of government that does not have the constitutional ability to do this they know they can't beat him in a ballot box, right? So this is their only kind of idea or what they're left with. They've impeached him multiple times. They've tried anything else they can, but they will lose to him in a ballot box. So they've set up this committee to try and skirt the separation of powers.
You know, Caroline, I've had to read how national reporters are intimating that President Trump doesn't care about his former staffers who were caught up in this, that he's left them to fend for themselves. But you and I know that that's wrong. At your urging and others people's urging, we set up the First Amendment Fund here at CPAC as a function of our C3, the American Conservative Union Foundation, in an effort to stand up for people's constitutional rights. And we view the participation in a political rally, a peaceful political rally, as the epitome of the First Amendment protections of our political beliefs. Right.
You know, I don't know what I would have done without you, Matt. You and Mercy are so incredible. Just so that, I was going through this and kind of did feel a little bit alone. I was in the first or the second wave, I guess, of people subpoenaed, and the first call I get is from the Schlapps and saying, Caroline, we want you to know there are others here to help you. We will help you. We're going to do whatever we can to help. What evolved, starting, with me and a couple others, has turned into something so wonderful. This fund that you have created to not only help those of us who are being illegally targeted by the select committee, but others. We discuss all the time now countless examples of, a cop in Virginia who donated to Rittenhouse's fund, and then all of a sudden he's being canceled. I mean, this is happening across our country, and it is so disturbing. The weaponization of the DOJ and this unholy alliance between liberal politicians in Washington, D.C., and the liberal media and the Department of Justice should have all Americans concerned as to what they are trying to do here. And just targeting private citizens is, to me, the most egregious thing that they've been doing. And if it weren't for the First Amendment funding set up, and I don't know what I would have done. And so it's been incredible that y'all set that up. And, it's ridiculous to say that Trump has left us all out to hang to dry. That's not true at all. I know that you're lock and step with him, and he knows that you're taking care of those of us who are being targeted by this. And it's so appreciative.
Yeah, he's even told me that he'd do anything to help. He wants to make sure that the message is sent to the new Socialist Democratic Party that they can't bully us into submission. And part of that is Republicans who are complicit in this. I remember when the Cheney family was very public in their displeasure that Scooter Libby, a friend of mine, someone I think was prosecuted for his political support of the Bush-Cheney administration, was really a political victim and target for his beliefs and service in the administration that Mercy and I both served in. Yet now it's Liz Cheney who is using those same tactics to try to destroy the reputations and bring into legal jeopardy members of Congress, people like yourself who worked for the Trump campaign, people who worked for the Trump White House. What is wrong with these Republicans? Have you given that some thought as to why they would participate in such a diabolical enterprise?
Well, I don't consider them to be Republicans. I consider them to be opportunists. And I think that there's a limited number, thankfully. It's just really Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney kind of alone on an island right now. And it's no shock to me that Kinzinger announced that he's not going to run again for re-election. It's untenable. Liz Cheney is certain to lose her primary to Harriet Hagerman. And there are others on this committee. You've seen Stephanie Murphy is kind of a moderate Democrat. Like I met her before, a nice woman who won in the Orlando area. She's not running again. They know what they're doing is so far out of bounds, and that the American public does not agree with this, that they are on this like sort of kamikaze mission at this point, right? Like they don't really have anything to lose anymore, and there's conservatism and conservatives and anyone who worked or is affiliated with Donald Trump. It's the Trump derangement syndrome. And if you go piece by piece through the different members on this committee, I mean, Schiff is no surprise there, right? Like this is a pattern of behavior for him. But I find most alarming is their question, that they are coming after all this because Trump was questioning the outcome of an election. Like questioning the outcome of an election is not a crime. In fact, Chairman Benny Thompson called Trump an illegitimate president in 2017. Like Hillary Clinton has said multiple times the election was stolen from her. Stacey Abrams still thinks she's the governor of Georgia. Adam Schiff spent 2 years feeding us a false narrative that the election was stolen with a collusion of Russia. We all know that's not to be true. Congressman Zoe Lofgren on the committee, she wrote an entire report objecting to the 2004 Ohio Electoral College. And this was an objection she made on the House floor that was then backed up by Nancy Pelosi. So if questioning the outcome of election is a crime, then the Democrats should be first in line to go into whatever the J6 jail is. This is ridiculous. We keep living in Washington as the Democrats are playing totally, they're at war with us. And we just treat it as politics as normal. Oh, we'll win the next election cycle. It's like, no. Like this is a war, and they're fighting it way better than us. And they are the key word, they're fighting. Like I feel like we just constantly rolled over and they fight, but we have to match them in what they're doing and call out this nonsense for what it is. And thank goodness you do. Molly Hemingway's been tremendous on this. Tucker Carlson's been tremendous, but the silence of the Republican members of Congress, I will say, has been deafening.
So we had you and I traded some texts yesterday about Senator Rounds, who was criticized by President Trump because Senator Rounds and a lot of other elected Republicans just don't want to talk about 2020 anymore. And I sent out a tweet, which we can put on the screen, that said, basically, I was in the White House when John Thune had his first Senate race stolen from him, in the state of South Dakota. I was involved in efforts to help Norm Coleman when he literally had his Senate seat taken away as they just recounted and recounted and recounted in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Ironically, a city he used to be the mayor of. Dino Rossi ran twice statewide from the state of Washington. Both those races, the most outrageous of election improprieties were associated with them. Republicans have always been nervous to take on election fraud in our major cities. Mostly it's on major cities, but sometimes it's closely akin to other Democratic constituencies because they're always so afraid that there'll be enhanced racial animosity and they'll kind of fuel this idea that somehow the Republican Party doesn't want people of color to vote, which is just it's so disgusting because the whole reason for the Republican Party was to get rid of slavery and then to give those slaves full civil rights, including the right to vote. What is wrong with us? Why are we so afraid to take them on? And if we won't take them on, won't we just lose every close election in the future?
I'd argue we have. I'd argue this is our kind of Pearl Harbor moment as a Republican Party. We have lost all three branches of government. We are not losing because we have inferior ideas or the American people don't agree with our policy positions. Like, we have the advantage of not being a party that believes in socialism. Like, America's not a socialist country. We are losing elections because we are horrible at a game that we don't understand and are not playing well. You and I have joked that, like, we're playing badminton and they're playing tackle football with knives at every given moment. And we have to fix that. And you have this old guard of Republican senators in D.C. who they are much more interested in, can they still go to cocktail parties with Washington Post reporters and K Street lobbyists versus their actual constituents back home. There's no way that Mike Roud's constituency believes what he just said, right? They want someone to go and actually fight for the party, fight for their mission, and they see what is happening. They see what's happening in their schools, to the economy, and they think this is outrageous. And he's probably retiring based on that statement. That's the only way out for these members who come out and make absurd claims like that. And it is a big problem in our party that we are not being smart about how we fight these things. We know that they do. There's election fraud every time. We're better about this. We expect it. But what happened in 2020? I've been saying, you and I've talked about this extensively, that, I don't necessarily know or believe if the election was stolen, but I do believe it was bought. It was bought and paid for by a few in Silicon Valley who wanted to tilt the scale for their preferred candidate and make it so that there was no possible way Donald Trump or anyone could have won. And it, I think, was improper. But, going into it in March of 2020, Mark Elias had, they've been suing to change our voting laws for forever, but they usually lose those lawsuits. So the voting laws are determined by your state legislatures. But because of COVID, the rules changed. And so in March of 2020, David Plouffe wrote a book. And you remember, David Plouffe was Obama's campaign manager. And in that book, he lays out how they need to do a block by block street fight only in the counties in the 8 states that needed to win that Hillary Clinton had won by 10 points or more. You're talking about Philadelphia and Milwaukee and these different major cities, that they need to put all of their money and all their efforts just to drive up the vote totals in those cities. And so as soon as COVID hit, they struck gold. And Mark Elias switched gears. He started suing in only those counties that David Plouffe laid out in his book. They started to win. But when you start winning, like these local election counties, like they don't have the funding to all of a sudden, it was automatic registration of everyone in the county based on the DMV, and then we'll mail them all ballots. Well, that costs a tremendous amount of money. These election counties don't have that money. Well, then enter the Center for Tech and Life Services, which was a 501c3 that never had more than $1.3 million in revenues. And Mark Zuckerberg announces a $500 million grant to this group. And who was running the Zuckerberg Foundation? David Plouffe. And who was running CTCL? Well, David Plouffe's intern in the White House, a 29-year-old young, I'm sure, nice lady who had no, I'm sure, idea what to do with $500 million, but that didn't matter. He had already put out the playbook of how to do this. So that's what they did. They went in and sued in each one of these counties, changed the laws, and they infused $500 million in private funding into our public election systems. This is how you saw, Joe Biden got 15 million more votes than Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton. Like, please, you were out on the ground with me all the time at these different rallies, and there was no energy to show that. But when you infuse $500 million into these select counties, that's how you drive up those vote totals.
Caroline.
Like, Donald Trump got 13 million more votes in 2020 than 2016. Like, no president has ever increased their vote total in modern history. Right. Obama lost 3 million. So this is just, it's quite simple, but we've got to fix it.
I completely agree with you, and I appreciate your passion and all your research, and you're really pushing to make this coalition, our side of the equation, much better. But I have one final question for you, which must just gall you. I know it galls me. You just brought up David Plouffe writes out this action plan. You brought up the fact that Zuckerbucks and other billionaires on the left funded it to the tune of $500 million. Have any of those people been subpoenaed before the 1/6 Commission? Have any of those people been subpoenaed in any entity or legal challenge over the fact that it's highly questionable to use these nonprofit dollars to pick a president?
Of course not. Like, if we had done this, Sheldon Whitehouse would have held 500 hearings by now. And so it is amazing to me that the level of scrutiny that the White House ellipse funding is getting, which is around $1 million, a little more, like that, versus the $500 million that they use of private funding to influence public election systems. That's not even being looked at by this committee. It is unbelievable to me, but of course they're not looking at that. Like, that isn't a way to bring down and humiliate and indict Trump's circle. So they're not going to look at it. But all I could say is I hope that a future Republican-led select committee will show the, same respect to due process that this committee has shown me, and I hope that they would show that to Mark Zuckerberg and Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and CTCL employees and Black Lives Matter event organizers and fundraisers. Because now at this point, it's like they've set a precedent. It's a very dangerous precedent for democracy, but it's set. And so I hope that McCarthy will use the same sort of subpoena power that I have spent a year of my life dealing with on the other folks when a new party takes power.
You hear that, Republican Party? I think Caroline Wren and myself have an idea for a special committee when we get our majority back after November, which I think I'm feeling more and more confident about. Caroline Wren, we really appreciate you joining us. We appreciate you for all you've done for the Trump campaigns during the aftermath of the election, for your perseverance through this ridiculous political persecution, and let's keep partnering together. I think there are some real lessons here for our allies, and I think we're going to learn them.
Absolutely, and if anyone can help support the First Amendment Fund, it is doing incredible work, and it is helping these people's lives out there. It's definitely needed. So thank you to you and everyone at CPAC and Mercy. Y'all are just such wonderful leaders in a time that we are really lacking leadership. So, well,
thank you, Caroline, and we're going to be right back to CPAC Now, America Uncancelled after this short break.